When a woman first senses that your interest is fading, her reaction is rarely what it seems on the surface. It's not simply sadness or heartbreak, it's a psychological shock, a disruption of emotional equilibrium. She feels something shift, something that once felt certain now feels unstable. The text slowed down, the tone changes, the energy that once pursued her now feels distant, and her mind, designed to seek emotional security, immediately begins to question why. That's when her ego and her heart step into battle. Her ego whispers, asterisk, why isn't he chasing me anymore? Asterisk, it's not about love in that moment, it's about significance. The feminine psyche is deeply responsive to emotional energy, and when that attention withdraws, it feels like an internal rejection of worth. She's not chasing the man, she's chasing the feeling of being seen. Because for many women, attention is unconsciously linked with value, and when that value feels threatened, her instinct is to restore balance, to figure out what went wrong, to regain that emotional certainty. But here's where it becomes deeper. It's not the loss of the person that hurts most. It's the loss of validation that the connection once represented. She starts replaying moments, conversations, gestures not to find closure, but to locate control. Asterisk, what did I do? When did he start pulling away? Asterisk, these questions are less about love and more about the ego's desperate need to understand what it can no longer control. The emotional shock of losing someone's interest doesn't just reveal how much she cared, it exposes how much of her emotional peace was tied to being desired. And this is the turning point where awareness becomes power. Because once she understands that her worth isn't dependent on someone else's attention, she begins the process of emotional liberation, and that's where transformation begins, not when she gets his attention back, but when she no longer needs it to feel whole. After that initial emotional shock settles, something subtle yet powerful begins to happen. She enters what I call the asterisk overcompensation phase. Asterisk, this isn't always conscious. In fact, most of the time, she doesn't even realize she's doing it. It's the mind's way of regaining emotional balance after feeling that sudden loss of control. When someone pulls away, the instinct isn't always to walk away, it's often to re-establish influence, to prove to herself that she still matters in your world. You might notice changes that seem small on the surface, but carry deep psychological meaning. She starts to dress a little differently, posts more confidently on social media, or engages in indirect communication, subtle stories, strategic silences, or unexpected compliments. It's her way of saying, asterisk, I'm still valuable, I'm still desirable. Asterisk, what she's really doing is trying to regulate her internal sense of significance through external validation. It's not about manipulation, it's about self-preservation. When emotional energy shifts, the human mind naturally seeks to restore equilibrium. But here's where the complexity lies. This phase isn't always about love, it's often about ego. The feminine energy is emotionally intelligent, but it's also deeply responsive to rejection. The sudden absence of attention feels like an imbalance that must be corrected, and overcompensation becomes a psychological defense. She's not trying to win you back, she's trying to win asterisk herself asterisk back through your response. And when that response doesn't come, it creates even more introspection, more emotional turbulence, and eventually the beginning of real transformation. The irony is that this temporary phase often reignites attraction, because confidence, even when born from overcompensation, still carries magnetic energy. But true strength isn't found in trying to prove your worth. It's found in no longer needing to. The moment she stops performing for attention and starts existing in authenticity, she reclaims her emotional power, and from that point on, nothing external can shake her again. Eventually, after the emotional shock and the subtle overcompensation fade, something quieter but far more powerful begins: reflection. This is the moment when she stops reacting and starts observing. The energy that was once directed outward now turns inward. The silence that once felt unbearable starts to speak, and for the first time she begins to see things not through the lens of emotion, but through awareness. At first, that reflection can feel uncomfortable. It exposes truth not just about him, but about herself. She starts to ask deeper questions. Asterisk, why did his withdrawal affect me so deeply? Why did I attach my sense of value to his consistency? Asterisk, these aren't questions of blame, they're questions of growth. Because real healing doesn't come from understanding the other person's behavior, it comes from understanding your own response to it. That's where emotional maturity begins. A self-aware woman begins to recognize that her reaction wasn't simply about loss, it was about identification. She had unknowingly tied herself worth to how she was perceived, and when that mirror disappeared, so did her reflection. But this realization is liberating, because once she becomes conscious of this pattern, she has the power to change it. This reflection phase separates those who evolve from those who repeat. Some women will stay stuck in the loop of blame, anger, and emotional dependence. Others will use the discomfort as a teacher. They'll study their triggers, understand their attachment, and slowly begin to detach not from love, but from need. That's when a shift happens. What once felt like rejection now feels like redirection. And that's the beauty of awareness, it transforms pain into perspective. The moment she stops asking, why did he change, and starts asking, what is this teaching me about myself, is the moment she takes her power back. Because growth always begins where blame ends, after reflection comes renewal, the stage where she begins to reclaim her energy and redirect it toward herself. This is when transformation stops being a concept and starts becoming a lifestyle. She no longer asks, asterisk, what happened, asterisk instead, she starts asking, asterisk, what can I create now? Asterisk, this shift in focus marks the birth of her self-reinvention. It's not about pretending she doesn't care, it's about choosing where to invest her emotional energy. At this point, her actions start to change in subtle but powerful ways. She begins showing up differently. Maybe she starts working on her goals again, spending more time in solitude, or reconnecting with her passions. What once felt like a void now becomes space for growth. This is when she realizes that emotional pain, when properly channeled, can become fuel for self-evolution. The attention she once gave to someone else now nourishes her own development. And here's what's fascinating about this phase. As she rebuilds herself, she becomes radiant again, not because she's trying to attract anyone, but because she's aligned with her authentic energy. The same calm detachment that once came from disappointment now turns into power. She doesn't need to prove anything, post anything, or chase any form of validation. Her peace becomes her magnetism. This is the moment when everything starts to shift around her. The people who once overlooked her begin to notice. The person who lost interest suddenly becomes curious again, but the difference is she's no longer seeking recognition. She's operating from self-awareness, not from emotional reaction, and that difference changes the entire dynamic. You see, when a woman stops chasing what left and starts becoming what's missing within herself, she evolves beyond emotional dependence. That's the power of reinvention. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the version of yourself that never needed proving. At this stage, something profound happens. She begins to understand the true nature of emotional power. She realizes that attraction was never about pursuit. It was always about energy. When she chased, she was operating from lack. When she waited, she was operating from attachment. But when she let go, when she detached, she stepped into alignment. That's when she discovers that the most magnetic form of presence is peace. You see, detachment isn't indifference, it's emotional discipline. It's the ability to remain centered no matter what happens outside of you. When a woman reaches this level of awareness, she no longer feels the need to convince anyone of her worth. She no longer takes distance personally. She understands that people's inconsistency reflects their own emotional state, not her value. That realization changes everything. Because once you stop internalizing someone else's behavior, you take back control of your narrative. From that moment forward, her energy becomes grounded, calm, yet commanding. She speaks less but says more. She engages only when it feels right, not when she feels afraid to lose, and this shift in frequency is what makes her truly powerful. Ironically, this is when the very energy she once lost begins to return to her, because people are drawn not to neediness, but to self-assuredness. Her detachment doesn't push people away, it draws the right ones closer. Because authentic confidence has no agenda, it's rooted in self-respect, not strategy. She becomes the kind of woman who no longer reacts to distance with fear, but with clarity. And that's where her true influence lies, in her ability to remain soft without being dependent, kind without being naive, and open without being vulnerable to manipulation. When she masters that balance, she's no longer seeking power, she is power. And the moment she realizes that, she never has to chase anyone again. When she finally reaches the point of emotional equilibrium, her reaction becomes quiet, almost unrecognizable compared to the woman she was before. She no longer overthinks, she no longer chases clarity, and she no longer seeks validation through someone else's presence. Instead, she responds with calm indifference, not from bitterness, but from understanding. She has realized that love is not meant to be proven through effort alone. It's meant to flow from mutual respect and emotional reciprocity. At this stage, she becomes selective not out of pride, but out of peace. The version of her that once tried to fix what was broken has learned the value of walking away from what no longer aligns. If the connection returns, it will have to meet her on the same frequency she now operates from, one grounded in awareness, not attachment. And if it doesn't return, she doesn't resist it. She accepts that not every emotional bond is meant to last, and that endings too can be sacred teachers. Her silence, which once came from confusion, now comes from clarity. Her distance isn't punishment, it's protection. She has learned that indifference is not the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. And from that emotional mastery comes a profound sense of freedom. She no longer needs closure from anyone because she's found it within herself. This is when others start to feel the weight of her absence. The same energy that once chased them now radiates without them. It's a powerful reversal, because the woman who once needed validation has become the woman whose peace speaks louder than any pursuit ever could. And that's the ultimate evolution, when she no longer defines herself by who stayed or who left, but by how deeply she chose to grow. Because once a woman reaches that level of inner calm, she doesn't lose interest, she outgrows chaos.